Hello everyone and welcome to the second episode in our series about Julius Caesar. Before we can actually start learning about Caesar himself, there is something we have to take a look at first, and that's the Roman Republic. You see, during this series we'll be following Caesar through a lot of the political and cultural world that existed at the time, and to get the most out of it we have to be at least a little bit familiar with how the Republic worked. It would be a real shame for me to talk about Caesar reaching one of his highest ambitions by becoming consul, and then everybody who's watching just sits there thinking that he started a consulting business. No, to fully grasp what went on inside Caesar's head, and understand his mindset and the decisions he made, we first need to know what kind of environment he was brought up in, and how that sculpted his mind and personality. First then, will we understand why Caesar grew up to be one of the most famous people in all of history. So that's what this episode will be about. Caesar was born around the year 100 BC, and at that point the Republic was already 400 years old. The Republic was a superpowered entity in the world at the time. The entire area around the Mediterranean Sea was under Roman control. It had grown to be this powerful at an unprecedented speed, and no other nation around could measure up against it. Polybius, a Greek historian who had fought alongside the Roman troops in the Third Macedonian War, was of the opinion that the reason for the Republic's strength was its political system rather than its military strength, because it was built to keep any one man from seizing too much power, which meant that it was free from internal struggles, and because of this strong infrastructure, it was able to devote itself fully on military conquests. But at the time of Caesar's birth, this wasn't exactly the case anymore. In spite of this system, internal conflicts and even civil wars had started to emerge. A lot of historians feel that the Republic was on its last notes even if the events following Caesar's life hadn't given it the final blow, which we'll see in some later episodes. Only a couple of years before Caesar's birth, two tribes called the Teutones and the Cimbri had massacred the Roman armies near Arusio in 105 BC, following 8 years of struggles. The Teutones and the Cimbri came from Denmark and was most likely looking for a better or more fertile place to settle down. Rather coincidentally, I was in fact born in the heart of the area where the Cimbri were from, and I don't really blame them for wanting something better than that. The Roman people were terrified of these invaders, most likely because they thought they were the same people who had invaded Rome in 390 BC. That, however, had been the Gauls, but everyone knew what description their ancestors had passed on through the generations. They were described as tall, light-skinned, and wild. And the Teutones and the Cimbri were described in very similar manners. So the very thought of an army just slightly similar to the one that devastated their lands earlier caused an uproar back in Rome. The Cimbri were unorganized, they were wild, they were brave, and they were unpredictable. To throw the Romans off their game, they used scare tactics as charging naked down the snowy mountaintops, which for some reason was incredibly scary to the Roman armies. Yeah. Anyways, at one point, when the opposing armies were camped on opposite sides of a river, the Cimbri hollowed out huge tree trunks until they were light enough for a single man to carry. The men would then pick them up and throw them at the Romans into the river. The Romans of course thought that they were throwing regular trees, and they trembled at the thought of fighting these godlike men. And in each battle against them, the Romans would lose spectacularly. Meanwhile, back in Rome, the people were anxious. The military leaders who had failed to crush the invaders were shamed, and the people demanded that a man called Gaius Marius should be the one to save the Republic from these barbarians. Gaius Marius had been elected as consul in 107 BC, and he held the position for 5 consecutive years. Normally you could only hold the position for 1 year at a time, with a minimum of 10 years in between. Him being consul for so long was unprecedented. But it was seen as a necessary evil, and it did pay off eventually, when Gaius finally defeated the Cimbri and the Teutones in 102 BC. All throughout this, there was a rising tendency back in Rome to solve political differences by using violence. A senator called Gaius Marius was beaten to death on the order of his rival, Caius Servilius Glaucius. Caius and his partner Lucius Appius Saturninus had previously used threats and violence to get their way. They may also have had another rival killed the year before that. But this time, they bit off more than they could chew because the people would not stand for Marius' murder, and they demanded of Gaius Marius to, quote-unquote, save the Republic. Gaius took on the challenge, and he ended up besieging them on the Capitol Hill, where he forced them to surrender. He had originally intended to show them mercy, but the public was in no mood for such shenanigans, and they stormed the Curia Hostilia, where he was holding them. Some of them climbed up on the roof where they dislodged the roof tiles and hurled them down at Caius and Appius, until they died. This time was very messy in the Republic. Regular laws were suspended and a kind of martial law was invoked. Violence begat violence, and violence was used to combat violence. Originally, Rome had been founded by several tribes who banded together. We don't have much archaeological or historical evidence to verify the theories we have today about the founding of Rome, but at that time the people of Rome all knew the tales that had passed through the generations about 7 monarchs that had ruled at first. We're fairly sure that the monarchy was replaced by the Republic around the year 509 BC. The monarchy had been something that the people of Rome were glad to get rid of, and everything political and cultural in the time after the monarchy was put in place to prevent any one man from having ultimate control of the people and the nation again. There had, however, never been made a constitution, and all the laws were just a huge mess of other laws, injunctions, precedents, and traditions. The word republic literally means public affairs, and everyone who had political aspirations had their own little definition of how these public affairs were to be handled. But this messy system gave the republic a flexibility that initially gave it strength. Instead of the power residing at individual people, it was held by institutions of which the most important ones were the magistrates, the senate, and the public assemblies. But I'm afraid we're out of time for this episode, and we're gonna have to discuss these institutions in the next one. Before the episode ends though, I'd like to thank all of you for the amazing reception that my first video received. More than 1,500 views and almost 300 subscribers from my very first one was beyond my wildest imagination. And I really want to say that I appreciate all of you for being here. My plan for this channel is to keep posting videos as often as I can, but I want all of them to be the very best that I can do. And unfortunately that does mean that they will take some time to make. At the moment I'm averaging around 2 to 5 seconds of animation for every hour that I work on them, and sometimes I only have a few hours a week to work on the videos. But hopefully I'll become a little bit better and quicker and the process a bit more streamlined as I go on, so it won't be another 7 months until the next one. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you all in the next episode of Stick Figure History.